If you would like a planting recipe for a large patio pot that provides colour and interest right the way through autumn, winter, spring and beyond, then you're in the right place. As in this video, I'll show you step by step how to plant this beautiful selection of plants planted in late September, which will do just that. There's a small evergreen shrub that carries bold flower heads throughout winter that open into full blooms in spring. Colourful foliage from two hardy perennials that flower through spring into early summer. A small shrub with colourful seasonal berries that should remain until the new year, unless the hungry birds need a feast. Plus a trailing ivy in a contrasting variegated colour that will weave its way through the arrangement and trail over the sides of the display. And the lovely thing is that this display has long-lasting value. Planted in autumn, but still looking good next summer, and can even be left in a pot for a repeat performance from next autumn onwards, offering tremendous value right the way through the year. So let's get started. Once we move through autumn, it really is time to replace the summer seasonal bedding plants with something which is going to provide colour through the late autumn, winter and spring months. And I like to do that in my patio pots. If you've got some spare ones, then get those washed out and ready. If you've got summer bedding in some of your pots, then you need to empty those out and prepare them. I've chosen a nice terracotta pot to plant up a selection of plants for winter and spring interest. This pot has got some drainage holes in the base. And the first thing I do is to cover those drainage holes just with some bits of old terracotta pot to stop the compost from falling out of the bottom. So place the bits of old broken terracotta pots over those drainage holes, and then I get some sharp gravel or grit and I sprinkle that over them just as a layer to improve the drainage in the base of the pot. You don't want those drainage holes to get blocked. You want any rain or water to be draining away, so making sure that the pots are free draining is very important. If you're using a plastic container, then just drill some drainage holes in the base of that pot to make sure that water will drain away freely. Now, terracotta, being a nice natural porous material, will dry out, and it makes the compost, particularly at the edges, dry out. That isn't so much of a problem through the winter months, but during the dry spring period, that can be a problem. And some of the things I'm going to put in this pot are hardy shrubs, which I want to go through the summer, so this patio display can actually be brought out for a second or maybe even a third winter. So I want to make sure that the pot itself doesn't lose too much moisture. And to do that, I just cut up some old bits of compost bag into small pieces, and I line the inside of my pot. I just put these around the inside before I fill it with compost, and that way you've got a barrier, a plastic barrier between the compost and the pot, still allowing the moisture, excess moisture, to drain out the bottom, but it just means that the compost isn't touching the pot, isn't going to dry out, and any roots which grow to the edge of the pot won't be drying out as well. And I think that's just a good extra thing I tend to do in terracotta pots, especially in summer, but for plants which I'm going to be growing through the whole year, I certainly don't want the compost to be drying out. You could just overlap little pieces. If they are sitting a bit proud, just trim them off with some scissors, but just line as much of that inside area as you can before adding some compost. And for compost, I'm just going to use a good peat-free multi-purpose compost mix. Any peat-free compost will be fine, and you can find specific composts developed for patio pots. The composts themselves need to be free draining. I quite like ones which have a little bit of extra loam mixed in, or you can mix your own, get some peat-free compost and maybe some John Innes number 3, mix those together, because plants like shrubs and hardy perennials really do want a compost which is going to have good long-lasting nutrition and support. So something with some added loam, some John Innes in it, is really beneficial. So when it comes to planting up your patio pots, I like to be as generous as I can be. So your starting point is really making sure you've got a decent sized container. This is about 14 inches across. You could choose a slightly bigger one if you want. So the bigger the pot, the more plants it will hold and the more variety you can put in too. Smaller pots, they're fine, but you'll get in fewer plants, smaller plants and less of a variety. So I think in this particular container, I can get an assortment of 5 different plants. It's always a pleasure sharing my hints, tips, ideas and advice with everyone. So please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button right away and subscribe to my gardening channel. There's plenty more videos on my channel for you to enjoy too. At the back of the display, I'm going to put in this nice euphorbia, which is called Miner's Merlot. And it's got a beautiful deep purple leaf. It will flower through spring, so round about I think April into May I'll start getting some flowers develop which are a golden yellow in colour. So I've got the foliage through the winter and I'm going to get flowers developing in the tips of these shoots as we develop through spring, and with a lot of these euphorbias. And I've grown other ones in patio pots. If you look at some of my other videos, I've got a lovely variety called Ascot Rainbow, which has got a variegated leaf in a pot. And that can be great for winter displays. But these will carry flowers through spring and early summer. Then you'll prune away these stems which carry the flowers. And I'll be getting new growth coming up from the base to replace it. And those will produce the stems, which I'll enjoy next winter. And will carry flowers the following spring. Next, I've got a hardy shrub. And this is a variety of Skimmia japonica called White Globe. It's a male variety, so the flowers will develop through the autumn and winter and just look nice as those flower heads are forming. But the blooms themselves, as individual flowers within each floret, will probably open around about April time to bring the whole display to a crescendo. Now, this little pot, which I found in a garden centre, has got 3 cuttings in it. And I chose one which had the maximum number of flower heads. So I've actually got 5 flower heads on here and some more green shoots as well. So when you're choosing plants for your displays, if you find some of these little small skimmias available for your winter pots, then try and choose one which has got as many flowers on it as possible. White Globe is a lovely variety. You'll find other varieties of Skimmia available. Things like Skimmia japonica rubella, which has got a red flower. That can look perfect in patio pots as well. But these little Skimmias are really good. Dwarf and compact at the moment because it's a young plant, but it will grow. So in this particular pot, I think it will look good for perhaps 2 or 3 years, and then it will get too big and I'll probably have to take it out and plant it in the garden and find a new home for it. So White Globe, nice contrast to Euphorbia Miner's Merlot. At the front, hanging over, I've put one of these lovely berrying forms of Pernetia, sometimes called Gaultheria or Gaultheria mucronata. These varieties are beautiful, aren't they? The female forms have these wonderful berries on them. You can get some varieties now which are self-fertile, so they should reliably form new fruits year after year. Now, when you buy a plant like this in the autumn, it will be covered with fruits, and you can get ones in pinks and reds and white berries as well. So depending on what your patio arrangement is, you can choose a Pernetia to suit the display. During the growing season, Pernetias actually produce quite long, lanky growths with slightly spiky leaves, but those have all been cut away. I can see where the nurseryman has trimmed those up to reveal the display of berries below. So the lanky green shoots have been cut off. Next year, as this develops out through the spring, you'll get that new growth forming. But again, next autumn, I can cut that away to reveal the fruits. So hopefully you'll get several years of flowers and fruits from your Pernetias as well. This will look lovely towards the edge of the pot, and the birds will adore feeding on these fruits as we move through winter as well. These variegated ivies form a lovely contrast to the deeper foliage, particularly of the Heuchera and the Euphorbia, and it will also have a trailing habit. So I find in your winter pots, if you can squeeze in some of these little dwarf ivies. They can look lovely. The stems will grow out and spread out as we move through spring and summer, but this can look lovely. This is a variegated variety called Golden Calibri, but you'll find lots of others on the market. The variety isn't necessarily the most important thing here. The important thing is to choose something which contrasts nicely with the other plants in your display. And this, being a dwarf variety, will have a slow growing habit, but it will just spread nicely and dangle down over the edges of your pot. And lastly, a heuchera called Black Taffeta. Again, a really nice contrast with the skimmia and also with the ivy. And it's got a deeper coloured leaf, a slightly frilly edge to it. There are dozens of varieties of heuchera on the market, and although this one, this Black Taffeta, is a beautiful variety and one you might find available, you'll find others in your garden centres. Really doesn't matter which one you choose. I've chosen a variety called Obsidian in the past, which has a big, broad, really dark leaf as well. They're a dark purple, almost black, shiny, a sheen to the leaf itself. And this one with a frilly edge I thought looked lovely and a really nice contrast to the other plants in the display. So there we have it, a euphorbia, skimmia, a panetia, little dwarf ivy, a nice heuchera, making up my winter arrangement. I'm going to start by positioning the Miner's Merlot this will be towards the back of the display itself. Now I want the surface of the compost in the pot to be about an inch below the rim of the pot, so I can fill it with compost and water it without the fear of the water dripping down around the edges. So let's have a look and see. Beautiful root system on this plant, lovely white roots forming. So I'm going to start by just putting him towards the back, check the height. This is, as I say, a good inch below the rim of the pot. I've got the lining around the edge, I can trim that back if I need to. And I'm just going to fill in a little bit of compost around this plant just to hold it in place at the back. And then I can choose the next plant, so just position it carefully at the back. Once you're happy with where it is, then you can choose your next plant. And I think the skimmia, this lovely white globe, will look nice next to this. Again, really lovely root system. Some people tease and break out the roots. If it was really, really congested, I might do that just to tease them out, but actually I think that's fine as it is. And I'm going to just twist this plant around and work out what angle looks best. Because I've got a taller flower here, I'm going to just tweak him underneath the leaves of the euphorbia back here, just to create a nice display around. Push him into position, adjust the height, little bit of compost in just around the back of that, just to fill in the little gap between the back of the root ball and the edge of the pot itself. And then that will look nice, nice little contrast. Next, we're going to go for this beautiful burying panetia. And panetias, I can already see the roots growing out through the base of the pot itself. So just see if I can tease that pot off here. It's really beautifully well rooted plant. Just sometimes you have to squeeze the pot a little bit just to ease it off. And all of these plants have been nicely watered. There we are. It's got a really fibrous root system in here. Nice and damp and moist. I want this towards the edge of the pot. Those berries will just grow out around the edge. So I'm going to squeeze him in under the edge of the skimmia, adjust the height so that root ball of the panetia is again about an inch below the rim of the pot. Just tweak him in there just to see how the height goes. I think that will look nice in there. And to contrast with the panetia, this beautiful variety of heuchera. And this, again, yes, it's got some nice white roots in there, nice looking plant. This just acts as a nice foil. Just see how the colour combination's working well here with these different plants. Just turn the plant around, turn the root ball around, adjust the height by putting some more compost if you need to. And I do with this one, so a little bit more compost, which I can put in underneath him just to raise him up a little bit, just to make sure that the height is about the same as the other plants. Nice contrast there. Actually, I'm going to turn him around that way because I think this leaf here is a little bit taller at the back. I've got the lining of the terracotta pot in there. Beautiful. I think that's just adding a nice little bit of contrast, and that just leaves room in here for my final plant, this nice little golden ivy. It's going to be a really good contrast. Again, roots growing out through the bottom of the pot itself, so I just need to tease that off. And again, these roots are growing out nicely. Might have to adjust the height of this one because it's a much smaller root ball, but this is going to contrast nicely with the heuchera on one side and the euphorbia on the other. Place that in there, and there we have it. My final job now is just to get more compost and fill in around the root balls of the plants themselves. Tease that compost down, firm it down in around each of those root balls, and make sure that you don't leave any air pockets. So I'll just get on and fill in with compost now. There we go, find a little bit of compost in here. Just tease that down with your fingers. The compost will settle down as you water it, so if you do find that compost settles too much, you can always top up with more compost over the coming weeks. The final job is to water this in generously. Water from the top, try and wet the surface of the compost itself so that it will settle down around the root balls, getting rid of any air pockets, making sure that the compost is really well watered and settled. And just keep an eye on watering over the winter. Sometimes in the winter the rain itself is enough to keep the display going. At other times the canopy of the plants in the pot can stop the rain from reaching the compost. So do keep an eye on watering and water whenever needed. And there you have it, a nice display which should continue looking good right the way through winter and spring. The nice euphorbia magic merlot, this beautiful white globe skimmia, the burying panetia, a dark leafed heuchera, this one black taffeta, and a little variegated ivy in here as well, just making a display of flower, foliage and berries which will look good all the way through winter and spring. Flowering display of the euphorbia coming on in spring. This display is going to look superb week after week after week. The lovely thing about planting a generous variety of plants in a container is that they'll all grow and develop to provide different periods of interest over the coming months. The flowers on Skimmia White Globe will fully open through March and soon attract bees in to feed. Each bold globe-shaped head is made up of dozens of tiny four-petalled white flowers, each with protruding stamens covered with pollen. Skimmia continue putting on a show right the way through into April, when it's joined by the opening lime green flowers of Euphorbia minus Merlot, the flower spikes starting to form at the tips of its main shoots through late winter, and they're now unfurling and opening, branching out into a canopy of flowers over the whole pot display. These flowers contrast nicely with its foliage, which is dark green through summer but develops a dark burgundy colour as temperatures fall through autumn into winter. And the flowers look lovely for several months, until the flowering stems can eventually be cut down at their base sometime in summer to make room for the new leafy shoots growing up from the base. This is a pot display that relies heavily on evergreen foliage for its appeal, which is why it can be grown in a prominent position all year round. By the end of May, that crown of dark purple, almost black leaves on Heuchera black taffeta are joined by wiry stems carrying small pink flowers, and it's these that give the Heuchera its common name of coral bells. That nice small leaved and variegated ivy golden colibri plays a supporting role to the other plants in this container, just weaving its way through the others as it grows and weeping over the sides of the pot with its glossy lighter green and white splashed leaves, contrasting nicely with the dark purple foliage of its neighbours. And as time goes on, perhaps after a couple of years or so, you might want to refresh the display by transplanting one or two of the larger plants out of this container into your flower borders, or perhaps into pots on their own to provide more space for them to grow. And that creates a new space for something new to be planted, something smaller, which then can enhance the display and keep this pot going even longer. And that's the lovely thing about choosing small shrubs and perennials for your patio pot displays rather than seasonal bedding, as these hardy plants don't die after one season and they have a further life in a new position where they can flourish for many, many years to come.